Gather round, friends. It's time for Officials' Tales. Hosted by three retired sports referees that coaches throughout Northern Ohio knew as the Three Blind Mice. They are authors of the book called Officials' Tales. So let's meet the authors and your hosts, Jimmy Borgia, Rick Hall, and Don Nardecchia for today's edition of Officials' Tales. Now here's your host, Rick Hall.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Officials' Tales. Boy, oh boy, we're going to try to do this again. We tried this once before with Mr. Fogg, but boy, we're glad to have him back. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my brothers in crime onto the stage. Don and Jim, back as always. The Three Stooges or Amigos or whatever the heck we are. Something. So how we doing tonight, guys? We excited to get Mark back on and try to do this the right way finally?
We are ready to go with Mark. I appreciate him coming back a week later and doing this again.
So for a quick introduction for Mark's kind of a legendary radio guy in our area. He's also been a coach and probably a lot of other things that we don't want to discuss live on TV or on the radio. And without further ado, let's bring on Mark Fogg. Hey, Mark. It's glad to have you back, buddy.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we kind of messed up the last time and things just didn't work out, but hey, we're glad to have you back. And like I said, you've been around the area for quite a long time. You've seen a lot of things, kind of like us. Kind of everybody knows you from coaching and and the radio. Like I said before, my daughter Nikki told me to tell you hi. She was the one that did the intro for the show, and she wanted to tell you hi and just see how you're doing and make sure you were still alive and everything. And I said, yeah, I think we can still see him. I don't, he hasn't been viewed lately, so I think we're good.
We're now.
Hey. Yeah, you got to give her props. She's the one that helps us out with all this technical stuff.
Is it really her fault that we had the technical stuff?
Actually, it was my fault for not pulling it soon enough. I didn't realize that there was a limit to our storage capacity. And once we met the limit, yes.
I went away.
You went away, and
it all went away.
Everything we had in the library went away. Luckily, we had all of it on either Facebook or YouTube, and it saved our proverbial, whatever. But hey, here we are. Now we're back with you. So, Don, you want to kick it off, and you got some questions for Mark, or you just want to let him ramble on?
Well, I've known Mark because he spent a lot of his formative years in Norwalk and cut his eye teeth in radio at WLKR and had a great opportunity to move just a few miles north and went to the powerhouse of the North Coast there at WLEC, and it was there for a long time. Tell us about what fostered the change, and you woke up with a lot of people. In Sandusky.
My wife loves the line that I wake up with more women in Erie County than anybody. Doesn't always go over so well, but yeah, I was very lucky because when I was a junior at Norwalk High School, Jim Westerhold at LKR had the system where every other year hired a junior out of high school to kind of be like an intern, do some work, be trained in the job and do on-the-job stuff. And it's always something I wanted to do from the time I was just a little bugger. And he hired me. And after high school, I went to, Bowling Green State University and major in broadcast journalism. And I'm taking political science, chemistry, world geography. And it's like, I hated it. It's like, I wanted to work in radio. So after a quarter, I left, much to my parents' chagrin, because they were furnishing me with a whole ride free. but I just wanted to work. So I ended up working after high school, turning it into a full-time job after I got back from that quarter. And I worked there until 1975. It was late 74 when what turned out to be one of my best friends, Bill Zimmerman, who unfortunately passed away about a month ago due to lung cancer. But he just kind of tipped off a buddy of his who worked with me in Norwalk that Tom Stauffer was leaving LEC in Sandusky, a legend in his own right. And he said, have Fogg apply. So I did. I got interviewed by another legend, Carl Bates, and got hired for the job and started in Sandusky in January 4th of 1975. So I stayed there for 45 years till I retired in 2020. They asked me to come back and do sports only. So I did football and basketball for them for 4 years until they decided I was only worth half the money. And I declined their offer of taking a 50% pay cut. So here I am. Now I do some work on BCSN TV, and I'm having a ball with those guys. So, things have a way of working out, but it's been a wonderful career. I've loved every minute of it. The hours have been perfect because I was always off around noon, and it allowed me to coach all my kids and all the sports they played, get to all their events. And, I missed the coaching part so much that after our kids graduated and moved on in life, I just stayed coaching, and I'm still coaching to this day in all of those sports. So it's a wonderful life.
Well, yeah, that's a blessing. I think when you can give back to the community and love what you're doing, I think that's kind of what we are. We did that as officials, and that's what we tell young officials now. If you're doing it strictly for the money, you're in it for the wrong thing. And same with coaching or anything really like that. I mean, you're not going to be a millionaire unless you're coaching professional or reffing professional. Well, and for us, it was like giving back. I mean, we made it fun. I mean, how could you not with these two guys, and especially the bushy Italian at the bottom here, and we always had a good we always had a really good time together. And but yeah, we always enjoyed listening to the radio. I know Don talks about it. We come back from games trying to pick up local scores, or we tune into the radio, listen to you guys, how it was going, what the scores were, and just to catch up.
That it really takes me back, and this was before the current owners have it, who cut all this stuff out. But Rick Jeffrey, Charlie Florida, I know two buddies of yours who officiated for years, and we're on the crew here, would always tell me, because before these owners took over back in 2008 or whenever it was, we used to do high school sports from 6 o'clock at night until midnight. And when the games were over, we had all of our, we'd have like 5 guys out in the field at different games, keeping all the stats and whatnot. And they'd come back to the studio afterwards, and Steve Schaffner or Dave Mailing hosted our scoreboard show, ran till midnight. And you guys weren't alone, because I, talked to so many people that, man, that's all we did. We actually would rush to our car after the game, get out and hear what's going on at all the other games, and hear you guys clown around and have fun until midnight with it. And I mean, we did high school sports in those days like it was ESPN, ESPN, and we treated it like a big deal, because in our minds, and I know it's just like in your minds, high school sports is a big deal.
It is,
and
absolutely
ignored.
For us, it's like Don always says, and it's the same reason we officiated the way we did. For us, it's an extracurricular. Okay. It's something that's an extension of the school. So you try to make it fun for the kids, make it a learning experience, a safe experience. We talk about that a lot, as game managers, sometimes you have to do things to make sure these kids are safe.
Yes.
So, go ahead, Don. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
When, if we were up along the lake anywhere, we'd hit 1450 to get the scores and get the rundown, because like you said, you had guys out to the other games in the area, and then they filed their report, came back to the station. You guys discussed things. If we were more down into the Route 20 to Route 224 area, we'd dial in Norwalk and find out some scores. If we were south, you're probably well aware of Davy Jones, who had the scoreboard show on the Bucyrus radio station forever.
Yeah.
And he had the phone board where the people would call in and give him he was a one-man show down there, but people would call in the scores after the games, and we could find out what was going on. And that, we're interested in that. We're just not there for the game. We like to know what's going on amongst the schools.
As passionate as you guys were about officiating is just as passionate as me and my whole gang was at LEC. And it wasn't me, because we had a whole lot of people who basically we paid they could fill up their car with gas to get to all these reports to where they were going. So they weren't money either, but it was just a passion of theirs. And it burns me. And I know we've talked about this before, but it just burns me when I have owners of radio stations coming to me and saying, well, let's face it, it can't be radio like it used to be. And that's a bunch of malarkey, because it can be if you want to take the effort to do it. And that's really all it takes. And it's like they don't care because it might cost them a couple of bucks to do it. And it's not in their budget. Well, make it in your budget, because I know of so many people around who would gladly support that as sponsors, just to have that kind of stuff on the radio. And now I hate it when they say can't, because I'm telling my kids when I coach all the time, I don't believe in that word can't, because can't, you're not going to, you won't, you're not even going to try. And that's a baby's way out. So I miss those days. I miss them tremendously. And I wish somebody with brains would buy local radio stations and make them local again, because it can't.
Yeah, it's a shame. They have so much to offer, and a local radio station should be local programming. You don't plug it into a network. You don't plug it into a feed coming from New York or Chicago or Detroit or something to get your music and your chit chat in the evening. You want to have your local stuff going on, especially on the weekends when the high school sports are so big in the smaller communities. It's the newspaper coverage they get, the radio coverage they get. You go into Cleveland, and unless you're the high school game in Cleveland on a certain night, you get about 3 inches of column of space for your game. So it's going to be missed, and I think it's just as trends. It's lazy radio, lazy community radio is what it is.
Well, and I will tell you this, Don. And I'm sure you've seen it too, Mark. You're live at these events. These small little towns, boy, they pack out the gyms. I mean, heck, you go down to Mansfield Senior. I mean, you might have a couple thousand people in that place, But then you go to a big school like Rocky River or Toledo Whitmer. Unless it's a big game, there's maybe 100, 200 people in there.
And forever, I'd been around Firelands Conference, NOL football, saw nice crowds everywhere. Once I turned to officiating, and the first time I went with Al Walfley, Rick Jeffrey, and their crew that they had me, we went to Lorain for Admiral King game. I was so excited to go to Lorain, to George Daniel Stadium, big crowd and stuff. They were playing somebody from Parma. There were 6 people in the stands, 6 people in the Parma side. This was back in 1980, 81. And I was surprised that it wasn't really full on the Admiral King side. But you go to the small towns, that's where it is. When the Lorain schools are doing well in basketball, they pack them up. But football, they weren't doing so well. So there was other things doing Friday night.
Well, I know you did a lot of games in the Sandusky Bay Conference, but I long for the late 70s and early 80s when, JV games began at 6 o'clock. If you were in your seat by 6 o'clock, you might as well forget it, because you're not getting in. The doors are locked. They're all full. I yearn for those days again. It would be fun.
Well, I know when I worked the JV games, they were always packed out, especially at Willard or Sandusky or anywhere, when we first got started. I mean, heck, there was people not wanting to let me in the games. I'd be walking up, they're already in line. They're like, well, we get back in line. I'm like, well, you're not going to start without me. I can tell you that. So, so I'm carrying the gym bag. I mean, now later years we had our luggage and stuff, but but yeah, I mean, it's just it's an experience for us. It was always an experience, and I'm sure Jimmy can talk about that, right, Jim?
Yeah, you finally unmuted me.
Well,
I like
he
the
wasn't at
idea
Def schools.
when Mark was broadcasting the game that we were working, I'd always look up, give him a thumbs up, and I'd say, "Hey, make sure you put a good word in for us and everything." And I believe you did, didn't you?
He
Yeah,
didn't probably crucify us.
you had
Well, he always
Oh,
did.
it's just like in the morning when you started your day, you talked about certain games because the one time it was a day that it was the beginning of the week, and we had a Saturday night game, and he said, "Yeah, I gotta put in a good word for my boys from Norwalk, Nardecki, and Borgia because they worked the game and did a pretty nice job."
Yep. Well,
It's amazing.
$5 paid off, didn't it?
I know, it's amazing what bribe will do, isn't it?
Yeah, hell
Holy
yeah.
smokes!
see, I can be bought for check $5, a piece of cake. But
Yeah.
That's about right on the button.
Well, and again, I know we've talked about this before, but it's frustrating to me, and I'm not a referee. I don't think I'd want to be a basketball referee because my ears are too sensitive. But
Well,
especially
yeah.
basketball, and I think we've talked about the story before. But a couple of years ago, I was on the radio doing a game up at Millbury Lake, and it was a tournament game. Sandusky High was playing. All of our equipment was working fine, except I had nothing in my headsets. Now I could hear the radio station coming back at me during commercials, but for some reason at the game site, I couldn't hear my partners. I couldn't hear crowd noise. I was like a mute with no sound in here whatsoever. So I had to take one of my earphones off so at least I could get some sound and feel like I was a part of the atmosphere.
Sure.
But what I heard coming out of fans' mouths was like, "Oh, I wish my headphones would work so I could put them back on again."
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because I know it'll bother you guys, but people yell at you guys for over and back, like you guys don't know the rules. They don't have a clue as to what over and back is or over the back. You hear them yelling all the time, "That's over the back. That's over the back." Well, that's only over the back on a junior high playground. That's about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
They don't know this. They think they know better than you guys. And I salute you guys too, because I tried to be a softball and baseball ump a number of years ago while I was coaching and working the two schedules together. And I think I've known baseball all my life. I know all there is to know. And I'm doing a softball scrimmage at Perkins, and there's a ground ball hit on the right side of the infield, hits the runner going from first to second. Well, that's easy. She's out. And whoa, time out. And I got a coach coming out of the dugout saying, "She's not out. There was a fielder in front of that baseline who had a chance to catch the ball, so she's not out." And I looked at my partner and goes, "Yeah, he's right. I didn't know that." And there's so many that are so intricate in every game to officiate, yet you have to know them right now. And for the most part, you guys are usually pretty much on top of it.
Well, I will tell you, that's why, I've been to a lot of 7th and 8th grade games lately because my grandson plays. But, I talked to one of the refs last night, and, it's like, "Well, how you doing?" "Oh, yeah." I say, "Well, there's a reason we call this referee purgatory. I mean, this is where you pay your penance. But all that being said, the key is that's where all the crazy shit happens.
Yeah.
If you can officiate that, and learn the rules, and even at that, I mean, like I know I told you this story before, but it's like Don's, false double foul thing. There's always something that comes up that goes, "What?" I mean, and when you're in a big game, to come up with that particular foul, I mean, I remember it clearly. It's in the book. I mean, I can remember it clearly where, Don's talking to himself, and I'm like, "Uh-oh." I'm thinking either Don is missing something or he's having a stroke. I'm not sure which, and he's talking to himself, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to let the bench hear what he's got to say. So I'm going to walk towards Don. So I'm walking towards Don, and he's talking to himself. And I'm like, "Don, you good?" And he's like, He looks at his hands, he looks at me, and he goes, I think I got a false double foul.
So I was thinking white 24 and black 15, white 24 and black 15. So I wouldn't forget them when I'd report one, the other one would go off at white, 24, 15. So that's when he got over, and I'm looking at my hands,
and I'm
seeing
like,
the numbers.
I'm like, you good, bro? One of those, and then and he goes, well, I said, you got a what? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, he is the rules interpreter, or he was, so I'm like, well, if he's got to know. So I started backing up to this, backing up to the coach, and, Don makes the call, and he walks over and starts administering it with Jimmy. And the coach from Perrysburg puts his arm around me, and he goes, hey, Rick, he goes, what's a false double foul? And I said, hell if I know. He pats me on the back, and he goes, now that's a good answer. I said, hell if I know. I have no idea. And I know, 35 years of it, you read it. It's just, you've never seen it. Now,
well, I used to teach it every year, but I went through it so quick because I don't think anybody ever have this, but here's where to find it. Here's what it is. And
so,
luck,
we do come up with stuff, but, if you can, to us, if you can have fun out there and put the game in the most simplistic ways, like our football head of football officials, Bruce Maurer, I think he's still. I remember the first time we met him, me and Don, and we're talking to him, and really nice guy, ex-NFL official. And he goes, look, I just got one word. I got one sentence of advice for you. And he's like, okay. And he says, if Helen Keller saw it in the third row, you better call it. Other than that, I don't care. So I'm like, in other words, call the obvious shit and everything else takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. So, and we always talk about, calling it early, taking care of the game, being good game managers. Now there's times that you can't, obviously. I mean, things get out of control and you just can't. I mean, you got two teams that hate each other. Hell, we had that at Sylvania Southview, and them and Bowling Green went at it, and we had a basket that wasn't all the way down, and that became a pissing match. And I'm like, man, this was going so good, and all of a sudden, I mean, these two coaches hate each other. We literally had to separate them at scores table before. That tells you how bad it is. Yeah, and it's, you get into situations where it's like, wow, this is just nuts, But I'm sure you've seen all kinds of stuff, and I know you've seen all kinds of great athletes. I know we have, Orlando Pace, Charlie Fry, Charles Woodson. We've seen them all. Micah Hyde, Nigel Hayes. We've been very blessed to be on the floor or on the field with some of these guys. Dane Kaiser. So I'm sure you have some great stories about things like that.
Well, it's fun. And Orlando Pace is obviously the first one that comes to mind when you follow his career from Sandusky all the way through Ohio State and the Rams and the Hall of Fame. But it's the one day when he was going into the Hall of Fame, we wanted to, at the radio station, call him, get him on the air since he's a Sandusky boy, which there's no such thing as just looking up Orlando Pace's phone number and giving him a call. So find somebody who really knew him well and have him call us, which he did. And Orlando and I just got talking, and it was funny because he told me at one point, he says, Mr. Fogg, and I'm thinking, here's Orlando Pace, and he's calling me Mr. Fogg. I'm like, holy cow, I must really rate here. But he said, my football career began in your front yard. I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Well, there's a plot of land out in front of the LEC studios at the time on Cleveland Road in Sandusky that was just an empty piece of land. It belonged to the city. So it was actually deemed as a park, although there was nothing there except grass. That's it. And it attracted some of the greatest football games you could possibly imagine, because the whole neighborhood would swamp to that front yard. And when I'd walk out of the station to go home, they're all out there playing, and they got their coats and their jackets and stuff all thrown on top of my car. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. I had to take the coats and they just threw them off my car so I could get in my car and go home. And he said, well, I used to be in those football games in your front yard. And I said, oh, it was your coat that I probably threw on the ground and got all mad. I said, yeah, that was probably me. So I'm a part of Orlando's beginnings in that way. I threw his coat on the ground, and I wasn't happy about it at all. But there's two really fun stories that really stick out in my mind about Orlando Pace. And one was the football game at Vermilion when he's playing, I think it was left tackle, and they ran student body right. Well, Vermilion was pretty good, and so was Sandusky. And this was like the last game of the year. And the game is on the line, and whoever was running the ball for Sandusky didn't have a thing to worry about because Orlando came all the way from his left side of the line, and he led this ball carrier down the right side, the sideline to the end zone, just plowing people out of the way as he went. And it's like, holy cow, look at this kid go. And I mean, Sandusky had quick running backs, and Orlando's out in front of him, and that running back's not catching Orlando, but the path is cleared for him. And that was the number one thing I remember about the football. But basketball, this is even better because I know people made a big deal in the basketball playoffs when LeBron James against Golden State made this huge block where he just ran down the Golden State player from behind and knocked his layup off the glass. And it's like, oh my God, the whole basketball world was in a frenzy because of this great play that LeBron made, just running him down. Well, little did they know before that, I think it was like in 1994 or somewhere in that area, when Orlando was a senior in high school. And they're playing Admiral King in the big house at Sandusky High School. And there was, I mean, no Sandusky team ever beat Admiral King. He just didn't do it. That was back in the days where Admiral King ruled everything.
Mm-hmm.
This game, I think, was in overtime at the time. And we were up by a point, and it was a breakaway from Admiral King. This kid's going down for a layup to win the game in the closing seconds. And here comes Orlando roaring in from behind, coming up over the top of that guy from behind and swatting that ball out of bounds to save the game for Sandusky. And it was one of the most athletic things I have ever seen in my life. And my memory doesn't work all that great, but I remember yes.
Well, that's a great story. It's amazing how when you see these superstar athletes, early on in their, budding careers, so you can tell the guys that are going to get to the next level. Yeah. It's you can just see they just got that little extra something.
Yeah.
It's just, like I had told the story the other night of, the first time we saw Nigel Hayes and him jumping over a kid and tomahawk dunking it off a rebound and Don calling the kid for a block that was underneath him. And I remember looking at Nardo going, what? Wait, he didn't even touch him. And Don's like, well, I think he took away his landing space. I'm like, Christ, I don't think he's came down yet.
Yeah, it's one of those things early in the game and St. Francis, the Tilo of St. Francis was terrible for 3 or 4 years in there. That's who they were playing. And I thought, this kid kind of stood his ground under there. And I said, I'm going to call this foul and set the tone that we're not going to play that kind of try to draw a foul on this kid because somebody's going to get hurt here. And this is a toss away game. So, sometimes you do things a little out of character just to maintain a little peace and order and decorum so the kids don't get hurt in a game that's no doubt who's going to win that one.
Well, so here's a question for you guys.
Okay.
Do you referee any differently especially when it's a big game? Do you call it a little bit more tightly early in the game just to set the tone, to let them know how much they can get away with and how much they can't get away with?
Well, we had a signal. We always talked about that before the game. We've got to own the first 4 minutes, and we've got to own the last 4 minutes of the half and the first 4 minutes of the third quarter as far as setting a proper tone. That doesn't mean we have to call out of fouls. We just have to talk a lot to the players so they know what we're watching and things like that. And we did more of that when we had two power teams, two really good teams. But we had a signal. See what I'm doing? I got a screwdriver and I'm tightening the screws.
Yeah.
And if any of us felt that things were starting to slip, we just gave that signal to each other. Maybe when somebody's coming up the court or whenever we could, means let's tighten this up a little bit. Let's get the train back on the tracks. And then we talk about it at halftime where it went again. And yeah, we do talk to try to maintain law and order without having to do it and call. We'd rather make each other aware all at once that we're going to start tightening things down, not one guy do it and the other two not. So,
well, I can tell you our goal was always to see what we had. And I'm going to give you a prime example. This is our last year together doing varsity, Don and I, basketball. We had Tiffin Calvert on Tuesday. We had West Holmes girls on Thursday. We had Monroeville boys on Friday. And then we had Toledo Whitmer on Saturday. To answer your question correctly, if we're repping Monroeville, that's going to be a tighter game than it is going to be a Whitmer, unless Whitmer's out of control. Because the level of athleticism is so much different that you don't call like every little bump. Like, I'll give you a prime example. At Whitmer, you could see a kid go up for a layup. He gets tapped on the elbow. It goes off the backboard, and his teammate grabs it and dunks it. Is it a foul? Yeah. But they got the bucket, and the crowd's nuts because the kid dunked it. So you're going to wipe the dunk away and give this kid 2 free throws? Nah. I mean, that's kind of like it's the thought pattern you have. Now, I will tell you, there's times that, and Don and I and Jimmy too, there's times you have to get after them and talk. And that's what we see when I go to games. I don't see officials talking to these kids. Talk to them. You can, not only do they know you're on the floor with them, they actually think you're part of the game. And if they know you're watching, 3 seconds, get your hands off. Hey, you're getting a little too close. It's too close there. Get your hands. We do in football all the time, but nobody knows it because we're so far away.
Right.
So, I mean, it's so much better if you can do that. The clock runs, the players play, and you take out the rough stuff and you're good to go. And I always knew we were calling a good game when only thing I heard from the coaches was, hey, that's traveling, or hey, that's 3 seconds. If they don't ask for nothing else, we're calling a really good game. So that was kind of our benchmark. I know we were very blessed to be together because we all knew each other, and we called the same kind of game. And we were able to help each other in situations when something crazy came up, or having the rules interpreter with you. That didn't hurt.
Yeah.
Like we had a girl with capes on her socks, and she's got these little capes, and Don and I are watching them warm up, and I'm going, you see that? He's like, yeah. I said, so I know we're going to get asked. I'm going to ask you right now, is there a rule against this? He's like, nope. And sure as the world, we get over and talk to the coach. That's the first thing he asks us about. And I'm like, no. So see, that in itself helps so much, and they're having a good time with each other. I mean, we pull pranks on each other, and there was always something going on, something going on behind the scenes. We even had like a little shirt grab thing that we do that my daughter Nikki created for Jimmy, based on him forgetting a couple of players' numbers on foul calls on a live TV. I was actually home that night watching him and Billy Seitz and Don work a game on WMFD. And Nikki's sitting with me next to me on the couch. We're watching the game, and Jimmy goes to score a table, and he gets that deer in headlights look on his face. And Nikki goes, he forgot that blankety blank number, didn't he? And I'm like, yeah, Yeah, he did. So we ended up coming up with the shirt grab for Mr. Borgia. Right, Borgia?
Yeah. No, well, these guys claim that I wanted more airtime on TV. That way, if I forgot the number, I could go back and then turn around. And the camera was still there on top of me, But I did forget the number.
Hey, Mark, on TV they're playing the Jeopardy theme song. Dee, 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 dee.
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing that, St. Mary's, I'm sure Rick Jeffrey would have helped you with the numbers.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, Ricky, I always look at Ricky crap at the scores table.
He screwed up when he was working the score clock on a game Jimmy and I did over at the Den when St. Mary's was playing St. Pete's. That was a pretty good battle. And it was right down at the end of the ball game. And he buzzes the horn and he calls me over and he goes, "I didn't start the clock on the last inbounds." I said, "What?" He goes, "I didn't start the clock on the last inbounds." I said, "Well, how much time did you miss?" He goes, I'd say about 4 seconds. I said, "Well, if we're going to put time back on the clock." Now, this time back on the clock, I think, was going to benefit St. Pete's because there wasn't a lot of argument about it. But but I didn't let him forget it, that he's laying his and it was fine. Yeah, the St. Pete coach was fine with our decision and fine with us. He didn't, just one of those things. But the funny part is that here, my football officiating buddy is the one that was working the scoreboard and the time clock that night. So,
well, and we love to give Rick a hard time, and it's well justified because he deserves it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In due fairness, how many guys do you see anywhere when you're refereeing or just watching a game who are keeping the official scorebook and doing the PA announcing at the same time?
Yeah,
it's tough.
It's
tough.
It is. He's a good multitasker, I guess, but it's probably a good thing he's not running the scoreboard anymore either, because that's a little bit too much.
Yeah, you're right. It sure is. Sure is.
And I'll give you a prime example of how we are. Okay. We were at a game. Jimmy had just got his eye exam and got his brand new trifocal lens contacts, which he'll have to explain it to you how it worked. But apparently he had to close one eye or some crap for it to work. And as we're walking out, I'm like, okay, who's going to be the ref tonight? And Jimmy goes, well, I just got this new contact, so I can't really see the book. And Don goes, well, heck, I forgot my glasses, so I can't see the book. So I was like, oh, shit, here we go. So I'm standing between two blind guys. And I'm going to have to sign the book. And go over there and going, man, that didn't really put me in a good frame of mind. I'm like, holy hell, what's going on here? Yeah. But that's where the story of the 5 good eyes come from, because Jimmy's a character, to say the least. So, but that just gives you an idea of how we made it fun. We always interacted with the fans.
Where do you go?
With you guys.
Where do you go? Do you have to go stir the pasta sauce or what?
I don't know what he's doing. You
never know about that guy.
I don't know. He's, you
Potty break.
never know with them. But Mark, I know. Go ahead.
I'm just going to tell you, last time we talked that nobody saw because we ran out of room. My impression, and this is so you guys know where I'm coming from. My impression of a good referee is if I'm talking to somebody after a game, and for some reason the officials come up and they'll look at me and say, well, who did ref tonight? If you guys aren't really even noticed, you've called a great game. And to me, if I was ever an official, that's the way I would want it to be. Because, you get the impression that there's some guys who are in it for the wrong reason. And they're out there because they want to make the flashiest signs they can. They want to be noticed by everybody and put on a show. And that's not really what a good referee's there for. But I love the way that you guys talk about it's got to be fun, because and we do the same thing at the junior high level where I am now coaching in basketball, because by golly, if it's not fun for the kids, they aren't going to go on and play the sport in high school.
That's right.
It's not going to happen. And it's still got to be fun for them in high school, because let's face it, guys, how many Orlando Paces do we really run across in our area?
Yeah, not many.
They're not having fun. They're not going to play hard for you. They're not going to listen to you, and they're just going to tune you out. So I salute you guys and any other referee that's the same way. It's just got to be fun. And the heck with the paycheck. You're right.
Well, and that's what I always see, good coaches do. It's all about fundamentals. And I always go back and tell people, I mean, John Livengood's a friend of ours. I mean, we've reffed his games for years. And, his famous saying is, it's not about winning until Friday night. That's why his teams were always successful, always, because his emphasis was on fundamentals. That's why it's called fundamentals. It's fun.
Yeah.
And and that's what happens when you go to game. I went, when I go to games, that's the first thing I look at. If you don't have sound fundamentals, you don't know how to break a press, you don't know, how to cut, you don't know when to pick up your dribble and when not to, especially 8th grade, 9th grade, and if you don't know it by then, you're in for a long road.
Yeah.
So I salute guys like you, Jim Caldwell, and guys that have been around like that in the lower levels forever and ever. And you guys have really put in the work. And I mean, it shows at the higher levels. I mean, that's what these varsity coaches want. They want you. They don't have to teach fundamentals at, varsity basketball. I mean, that's too late.
Yeah, it should all be decided by then, and you should know the game, and you should, and kids at the junior high level look at us like we're crazy, but we keep telling them. And Jim Caldwell, that you mentioned, who coaches 7th grade with me, is the biggest stickler on this. It's like we drill them and drill them and drill them on using their left hand when they're laying the ball at the basket from the left side, and they all kind of are like, well, we are actually okay if you get in a game and you're under pressure and you're going to the basket from the left side. If you want to lay it up with your right hand, that's okay. But in practice, you're going to do it with your left hand, and you're going to learn that God gave you 2 hands for a reason, because someday left hand is really going to help you. And thank goodness, we've got 8 kids on our 8th grade team this year, and I think at least 5 of them have got that left hand down pretty good. Mm-hmm. But what drills me, and I know you see this all the time, Rick, is we say it's okay if you're going to shoot with your right hand, but when you're dribbling to the basket from the left side, you better be dribbling with your left hand. Mm-hmm. So the dribble drills are always there. If you're dribbling with your right hand and you lose the ball, you're going to see some coaches that aren't going to be very happy, because it's pretty easy to pick it off that way.
Yep.
Use all the tools that you've got. And when you get to high school, they're not going to come back to us and say, hey, how come little Susie over there can't use her left hand? It's like, that's back on us.
Well, and that's the key. I mean, people don't understand the key to keeping, a good offensive player, dribble drives, guards, and sometimes small forwards. You got to keep the ball between you and the defender. And if they're on your right-hand side and you're dribbling right-handed, it's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. And that's what I tell the kids all the time. I'm like, basketball is a simple game. It really is, I mean, but it takes practice.
Right.
You have to work at it. You have to work at shooting free throws. Jimmy and I, Don, we can tell you, I bet you 70% of the games are decided at the free throw line. Maybe not at the end of the game, but you watch, you lose by 6 and you missed, 7 or 8 free throws. I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
It's important. Coach of mine used to say all the time, there's a reason they call them free throws. There ain't nobody guard you. You can take 10 seconds, take a breath. And I see Donovan Mitchell doing it all the time at the free throw line. He'll grab the ball, he'll close his eyes, take a deep breath. Then he does his routine and shoots. Hey, man, that's key.
It's funny because the other day, well, it was just last night, we had our junior high girls were playing, and one of our kids just went lights out, and she knocked down 6 threes in one, which is fast. But when we looked at the book at the end of the game, we showed it to her. She was 1 of 4 from the free throw line.
Yep.
Like, how can you knocked down all those threes. And well, it's one of those. I know, Coach. Well, and I did this with my niece, my great niece, a couple years ago. I was with her out in Noblesville, Indiana, and she loves basketball. She's now a junior, and Don, it's Casey's.
Casey's granddaughter. Yeah.
Well, she was pretty tall. She was as tall as I was in the 8th grade, and she wanted to go down the park and she wanted to play. So I'm showing her a few of the things we, show our guards and our posts, because she could play them both in middle school, and how we coach them. And I said, if nothing else, you need to get out in your yard, and they've got a basketball hoop in their driveway. I said, you need to shoot 100 free throws every day.
Yep.
Now, sounds like a lot, but it's not going to take you that long. But you need to shoot. And I love this, not just because she's my great niece, but I love this kid to death, because she sent me a video the following week of her in her driveway with a piece of chalk laying on the driveway. And every time she shot a free throw, she would mark down she shot another one. And she had another column as to how many she made. And, by golly, right now she's a junior in high school, and that kid will knock down 70-80% from the free throw line. And how many kids do you see nowadays that can do that?
Doesn't happen very often.
No.
It's all about the form and, using your toes. I can't tell kids that enough. If you finish on your toes, 9 times out of 10, it's going in.
Yeah. And
I'm back.
Yeah.
Hey.
Did you leave me? Hey, I lost my phone connection there for a while, but just before that, you were talking about me with my bifocal contact lenses. That I should never. I went to the doctor and I said, I got to get me a contact lens so I can see far away and close, because it don't look too good when I'm squinting checking the books. And my doctor said, well, yeah, you can get one for far away and one close up. He says, just look forward. Everything will focus up. Like a goofy idiot that I was, I decided to tell these two clowns. So first game after, I blew the whistle. As I'm going to the table, I passed Rick, and out of Rick's mouth was, which eye did you call it with? You got to be shitting me. I said, that was the worst mistake I made.
You sure you got the right
as
one?
you're talking about your great niece with the free throws, over the years that we had officiated, can't think of his name, the boy or girls coach over at St. Joe. Was it Gary?
Gary Geller.
Yeah. You could go in there, and that team of his shot, I'd say, pretty damn close to 75% from the free throw line. That team.
Every year.
And to get girls that way,
doesn't happen very often.
no.
Doesn't happen with boys.
No.
Yeah.
But
I wrote a few things down today, Mark. Things that I'm thinking, what are some things that Mark saw and in his days? And the first thing I thought of, and the guy I love the guy as a coach, was Dick Winnis when he had his girls basketball teams over to Huron and they won the state championship. And I just got the biggest kick out of officiating for Dick. And I know he was a heck of a defensive football coach too. And he always, one of those guys that would stop by when we were doing a Huron game. He'd always stop by before the game and say hi to each of us, because he knew us all and that. But that's, it's just one of those things. It was way back there, 84 when they won that. Buckeye Central won the Class A, and Huron won the AA, and Shelby won the AAA, and they all were wearing red and gray or scarlet and gray, and all from this tight little area up here. Yeah. Very unique year.
Dick Winnis, and I'm not telling any lies here. I'm like you. I love the guy to death. He was on my sports crew for years until he passed away. But when he was coaching those girls over at Huron, they called him Papa Bear, and they absolutely loved playing with him. He made the game fun for them, just like we talked about before. But the respect that they had for him, and they knew darn well if they crossed him, And I'm going to tell you honestly, and this is God's honest truth. I try to coach like Dick Wennis did, because he didn't yell at his kids. He yelled to them if he needed to be heard, and goodness knows he could yell. But he never yelled at them. Now, if they were starting to get out of line a little bit, now he raised his voice, and it's Jimmy Caldwell and I talk about this all the time. We don't yell at our kids. We'll yell to them, but if they're starting to get a little bit too out of line or unfocused, then you yell at them. Now you can hear a pin drop. You've got coaches who will, scream and holler and try and make themselves look like good coaches by screaming and holler, stupid and things. And so kids tune that out. If they don't respect you, they're not going to play for you. But I have never seen a group of kids play as hard for a coach as what I saw them play for Dick Wennis when they won that state championship. And I don't know if they were the most talented team in the state or not, but they played hard because they respected the man and they were having fun doing it.
That's the key. I know Steve Gray did that too with his team that won the state.
Oh,
those kids were talented, but boy, they played their ass off for Steve, and I know he appreciated that. You can always tell good coaches, though. We've been very blessed to have some of the great ones. I mean, Rob Sheldon, Steve. We've had a lot of great ones around the area. Even Robbie's son Chris was great. We give him a bunch of shit because we reffed his games, So, and Coach Cook, and we've been very blessed to see some of the best coaches, I think, in America. Some of the guys that really put in the work, football and basketball. And you can tell. I mean, you can really tell. I mean, I brought up Perrysburg before, and they were the team. They've had the same boys basketball coach for forever. And you'd be under the basket, after working a game or two of theirs, and year after year, and you could literally see the play coming. I mean, you knew what was coming. I mean, you could just see it. And it was the same play, the same motion, the same ball movement, and it scored every time. Amazing. And I'm like, it was like what's her name over at Amherst Steel. I mean, those girls, man, they were a machine. I mean, absolute machine. Tim Tucker up at, Margaretta.
Yeah, that's another one I thought about, had just how many really good years. And they just brought the town to away games, especially in the tournament runs. They packed the houses.
And, I probably will offend some people by saying this, but I'll say it anyway because I truly believe it. I really think that Tim Tucker is the number one reason that we have such good girls basketball in our area, the Sandusky area now, because he elevated that. I mean, girls were just, they're okay, they would play basketball. But he took it to a whole new level, and people got mad at him because he was winning by so many points and all that. But his theory, I remember him telling me one day, is they've got to get themselves up to where we are. It's not up to me to play down to their level. And, a lot of people would hate that kind of attitude. But when you stop and think about it, there's a lot of teams that wanted to get Margaretta. Well, really, what is that? It's respect for what. Sure. And there's a whole lot of programs that took that under their wings. And we've got some pretty good girls basketball teams around here now. But I really trace it back to Tucker's teams because they were good, and they've been good at Margaretta ever since. So he started a trend over there that hasn't died yet.
Yeah, I know. We had Brenda Friend. She was incredible. You just feel blessed when it's so funny. Like when they would see us come in, and they'd be like, oh, you could just see like a sigh of relief on their face. They'd be like, oh, I know what we're getting tonight. We got the Three Stooges. We're good. And
when we retired, Brenda said some really nice things about us, and the last 3-4 years after we retired from varsity ball, Rick and I hung around and did some freshman games, and Brenda took the Norwalk freshman job for a year. So we walk in the back gym over at Norwalk for the girls' game, and she turns and she almost I probably threw her neck out of shape for the double take she took when she saw the two of us walk in the gym, and then she came up and gave us a big hug, each of us.
But and that's what for us. I don't know about you, Mark, but for me, that's the ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
When you hear coaches say, "Hey, we love having you guys." Now don't get me wrong, Rob Schilder would give you a bunch of shit when you showed up, but he was glad you were there. I mean, that's the first thing he would do. He'd walk in the back door and he's out there in his coach's office, and Christ, we couldn't get any better than you guys. Jeez, I'm gonna have to talk to the athletic director. It was almost the same spiel every game. I swear to God.
Yeah.
And if you didn't like you guys, word to you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and my other favorite part was, he always wore this towel around his neck, and he'd always be like up in our ears. If we were close to him, he's talking to us, and the fans were always crazy. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, give him hell, Robbie." He's not giving us hell at all. And he's like, "Man," he goes, "Do you guys have any good games this weekend, or where are you guys going to eat after the game?"
Yeah.
Like, that's really what he was talking to us about. He wasn't talking to us about the game at all.
He was the most misunderstood coach by the opposition's fans. I'll tell you what, I've seen that guy catch pure hell from opposing fans, but yet I've seen him his last year. This really touched me. The old time rivalry over that way in basketball was Buckeye Central and Winford, because at one time neither of them had football. And so it was Rob's last year, and it was last time going down to Buckeye Central. And while the teams were warming up, he was up in the stands talking to the students from Buckeye Central. They had a big pep club. He was up there. He wasn't paying attention to his kids. He was enjoying the whole event. And I thought, man, oh man, if more people see that side of this guy, they wouldn't believe it. But I just got a guy was.
Can I tell you one story about that? It builds on that, fans hating the opposing coach.
Yeah.
And if there's ever a guy who I know I was there and I hated this guy, was Tony Manafo at Huron. Because and I'll tell you this story, because when I was in high school at Norwalk High, I was a manager of the football team by sophomore through senior years. And our senior year, I don't know, we lost like 72-0 or some god awful thing. It was awful. But then I go to work in Sandusky. Tony Manafo still coaching, and we in those days had coaches shows we put on every night of the week, and you had to go to the school, sit down one-on-one and talk to the coach. I was deathly afraid of this guy. And they were probably the lousiest coaches shows for the first couple of years I was there, until I really got to know Tony. And then it's like, then you just grew to love the guy. But I told him one day, I said, Tony, I used to hate your guts. And he goes, okay, now let me ask why you hated my guts. I went to Norwalk High, and I'm standing on the sidelines, and all the time you were just, the scores getting out of control. It's 54-0. It's 68. It was just horrible. And there you are on that other sideline, prowling up and down with that stupid Tiger jacket on, and we absolutely hated you. He says, you know what? And this is Tony. I just love this. You know what? It says, you and all those other Norwalkians over there. He said, you're too busy hating my jacket and me prowling up and down the sidelines. You forgot that I had 11 kids out there kicking your ass up and down the field. The misunderstanding, hating this guy and then growing to love him when you just get to know him.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think it is that way with officials, too, because when you first start, I mean, you're always a little scared and a little intimidated, especially by these big name coaches. But boy, as you get to, you've been around a while and they get to know you, and, I mean, there's a lot of them like that. I know Joe down in Ontario, very famous coach. He could be intimidating, he could. And I remember our tournament game, Don and we're working with this guy, and we didn't even know who he was. And we're in the front. the ball's inbounded. I'm in the front court in front of Joe. They've got a 3-on-2 fast break going. The ball's starting to leave the back court, coming to the front court. My partner, not Nardo, my other partner, calls a foul in the back court, knowing that if that ball gets to the front court, that's a layup for Ontario, right? And I look at Joe, and Joe looks at me, and he goes, "Hey, Rick," he goes, "can I decline that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's the wrong sport, Joe, but thanks for asking."
At least, yeah.
Yeah, he had a big smile on his face. He was like, "Can I decline that?" And I'm like, "No," because he saw what I saw. And I'm like, but that's the little interactions with these coaches I always loved.
Yeah.
And I always had I'd always get them on our side by just talking crap. I can remember coaches saying, "Hey, you missed that one," or "You missed I'd be like, crap, there goes my perfect game again. I'll try harder next time. Now they're on your side. They're like laughing, going, "Yeah, but that's how you do it. I mean, they talk about verbal kung fu and stuff, but there are guys that you're never going to get across to. They're just going to be irate with you, and you're screwed. So you're just going to have to, you treat them different, and be like, sometimes you got to tee them up, or walk them back to the box, or get them back behind the restraining line in football.
Yeah,
that's the quickest way for an official to get to a coach. Just look at his feet. Look at his feet. You don't even have to say a word. Just look at his feet. If he's out of the box or in that restraining area, it's amazing how quick they change.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, that's right.
You talked about it before, Rick, but I love, especially at the junior high level, and you seeing all those games with with your son playing down. It's really neat when junior high officials will just stay cool and calm, because I think fans are even worse at junior high games than they are.
I agree.
Absolutely.
It's horrible. Yeah. It's literally horrible.
But the ones that will just sit there and talk calmly to the kids and kind of correct them if they did a travel or something that, they shouldn't have done, talk them through it and remind them of it. They can actually be like coaches. And I don't mind guys that do that for the right reasons at all.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what we did at the varsity level too, Mark. I mean, we would talk to the kids. Keep your hands up. Get your knee out of his ass. Get out of the paint. If I have to tell you get out of the paint 3 times, it's been 3 seconds.
Yep.
Just an FYI. I mean, if I'm telling you, that means I'm watching you.
Yep.
Keep your hands off, or if you just have the little jab back and forth with them, like, "Oh, you didn't see that." I'm like, "Look, son, I created that stuff way back when they used to have to rewatch it on black and white film."
Yeah.
I mean, don't even give me this stuff. I used to do that stuff when I was in school. They'll start laughing, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. And, especially with junior high kids, because as much as you try and cover, you never have stuff happen in practice that happens in a game.
No.
So
No.
They have to be kind of coached a little bit more along. I mean, people that do that, officials that do that are the greatest.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, we're getting a little long, so I'm going to go ahead and let you give us your final words of encouragement here from all your 50 years, and we'll head into the sunset for the evening.
I have it posted on just about any social media I'm on, and it's whether I'm calling a game, whether I'm coaching a game, what I'm telling kids all the time is just play hard, have fun. That's the name of the game, and it's going to be appreciated by everybody. I have one girl on our team that comes up to me all the time and says, I'm sorry. I said, no, if you're giving it your best, I'm never going to be upset with you. Just play hard, have fun. Then it's all taken care of from there. But I feel so fortunate in the career I've been in to have so much exposure to some great athletes, some great coaches, and some great officials. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, thanks again, Mark. And hopefully we'll have you on later on down the road here, maybe after you win your tournament or something, as a congratulations. Yeah. And again, keep your fingers crossed. And again, thanks again for joining us. And take care and good luck.
Thanks so much.
Great having you, Mark.
Yep.
Thanks.
Good luck.
All right, everybody, as we're wrapping up tonight, we want to say, hey, our book is still available at the Common Good. Buy one for $14, 2 for $25. You can also go out to the famous Amazon, and where everybody freaking shops now. Well, maybe not Jimmy, but everybody else on the planet. And you can also get our book there, Officials Tales book, and download it. You can get it in hardback, softback, and digitally. But
get that Kindle. You got the Kindle or the whatever. You can get the book there. I think it's $5.95 for the Kindle edition.
Right, and the hardcover is all color. So if you want to see what Jimmy really looks like in paperback, in a hardback book, and if you think you might have seen Sasquatch, buy the book.
Buy the book, yeah.
And thanks again for joining us. We're planning on having Steve Gray on our next show, and boy, that should be full of piss and vinegar. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Have a good night, everybody.